Okay. And we'll say good morning to Foundry Fam, and we'll give people a minute to join in. Well, we'll start slow. Abel, thanks for coming on. This is small fries because I know you've been kind of all over the place on lots of outlets. So thank you for giving us a minute to talk about what's been happening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Foundry family, we've got with us today Abel Nuñez of the Central American Resource Center for DC. He's the executive director, a dear friend of Foundry, and a wonderful community partner to work with around, especially for us and the Social Justice Office with the ID ministry, as we encounter folks born overseas or encountering needs for adjusting status related to immigration. CARECEN has been a vital piece of partnership for us to be able to help guests as they navigate what is an incredibly complicated process, and which can also be an incredibly expensive process. So we're very grateful to them. And today we have a chance to talk a little bit. It's not really fair to say let's talk about immigration because that's a bit extremely broad in this moment, but we do have a chance to talk about what has been observed from CARECEN's perspective in terms of like what are clients bringing in with them, how are workers faring, and things like that. So Abel, I'll just invite you to say a bit about yourself and a bit about the work of the office overall.
Thank you, Pastor Ben, for having me. Yeah, it's been an incredible time, and I think just like everyone, we are trying to deal with the health crisis. So just like everybody else, starting around mid-March, our staff the office was closed and we started working from home, really to ensure that we were playing our part in making sure that we can sort of bend the curve of this virus. But our staff continue to work remotely, working in our immigration clinic, working in our housing clinic, even citizenship. Although we offered classes and those had to be canceled, there were still things that we've been trying to do. Now, through our housing program, we really sort of been spearheading all of our efforts around COVID because that's where we're hearing it first. And there's really a lot of pain out there. I mean, that's one of the things that I can say, particularly in a community that has been hit at both ends of the spectrum in terms of how this virus has hit. So because our community is hyper concentrated in the restaurant industry, the hotel and tourism industry, they were the first ones to feel being laid off. So our office began to get calls with, assistance with rent, assistance with the unemployment process, because a lot of folks had never interacted with those processes. And they were, for the first time, they had to sort of seek out help. And we were a conduit for that. We were a conduit to make sure that people had at least a pathway to the resources that they needed. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, because we're also concentrated in the construction industry, the cleaning industry, we had a lot of folks that were still working and they were hit with the virus. So right now, Latinos in the DC area have the highest rates of infections. And what we've seen with a lot of our clients is that because of their living conditions, where you have multi-generational families, where you have a lot of people living in small spaces, when one of the members of the family got it, all of them have it, right? And so that's why we're seeing an explosion of people being, infected by the virus. And I think overall, this health crisis has really opened up the floodgates and open up the eyes of many people of the inequalities of our society, right? We see the systemic issues, the lack of access to healthcare, the lack of access to resources for people to live their fullest life. And so, and that impacts more communities of color, because you see the African American community having the highest death rate, right? And this is not because the pandemic is hitting them harder. It is just a legacy of the inequality of the U.S. society. And so we have been trying to address that by ensuring that people can stay in their households, educating community. There's a lot of people in our community that live in in what I call informal settings, where they're renting a room, they're renting an illegal basement, and so they don't have a lease. And so, although the emergency measures that the city has taken prohibits people from being kicked out of their housing, there's a lot of people that have been kicked out because, again, they've been threatened, or they don't know the laws themselves, and they've been victims to that. So we're trying to educate people, give them the knowledge so that they can take action for their own lives and really protect their rights. And so it's just been a busy time for us to make sure that people know their rights, but also help them navigate the system, particularly when they have limited English skills. And I think that, we're also finding out that, the immigrant community is also a vital part of our labor force, and we're feeling it. So it's been really difficult. Now, one bright spot is that DC, through DC Events, who manages, like RFK and a lot of our tourism and conferences, they gave actually $5 million for the undocumented community. And CARECEN has been one of the organizations that is actually distributing this stimulus, and they're given in the form of $1,000 per family in like a gift card. And to date, we have given out close to $700,000, just CARECEN alone, and there are other 4 organizations that are doing the same. But as we're doing that, as good as that is, we hear the pain of the people, right? That they're behind 5 months in rent, and given the rent in DC, you're looking at $6,000-7,000 in debt. Most of them have found ways to borrow money to kind of pay the like either March or April's rent. But now not only are they in debt with their landlords, but they're in debt with whoever else they're borrowed from, whether it was family, friends, or just other mechanisms that are in our community. And so one of the things that we're seeing with this health crisis is that it is really like the tip of the iceberg of multiple crises that are to come in the next couple of months, right? Whether it's a rental crisis, whether it's an eviction crisis, right, whether it's a debt crisis. And so I think that it needs to be all hands on deck. And I know that everybody's hurting. Everybody has been impacted. This is something that has touched all of us in multiple ways. And so it's going to take a lot of us and all together to get through it.
Well, let's think about think about the future a little bit, maybe together. We know there had been eviction moratoriums in different places put in place. Some of those are scheduled to run out. Hopefully they'll be extended. We know that people are going to get behind on bills and things like that. And we know that the measures that were passed at the federal level and at the local level didn't include everybody. Mm-hmm. And so that was why we saw some of the Events DC money moved over, was because the city knew that they weren't going to be able to move federal dollars into the hands of either undocumented families, or even families that maybe just have one undocumented member while everybody else was documented. They were prevented from accessing those federal dollars. So as we look into the next couple of months, what ways can we be supporting, either right this minute or as we vision into the sort of problems that are about to pop up? Mm-hmm. How can we be supporting the work of CARECEN, and how can we be kind of positioning ourselves to try and fill in where the holes in the safety net are much too large?
Yeah, so I would say that there are multiple ways. One, sort of at the individual level, those that can give to different entities should, this is a moment in time where we need to be as generous as we can be, and to provide resources to the institutions that are on the front lines of doing it. And we've seen that, as people are, have been reaching out to healthcare providers, have been reaching out to multiple entities. I do think that the response beyond an individual one needs to be institutional. We need to make sure that our government, our municipal government, is doing the right things, because this is so large of an impact that one entity, one individual is not going to really make a dent in it. What we need to make sure is that our government, our local government, is putting in places the policies that help people get back on their feet. And that is something where we need the institutional help. We need everybody asking their elected officials, local, state, even national, to make sure that they're doing the right thing. I think locally is about making sure that those rules against eviction stay on the books for longer than just a health emergency, to make sure that the city puts in money, not only for the undocumented, but for people that are in the informal labor force, those that are in the emergency rental programs, because that's the type of help that we're going to need. And we need to push our elected officials. We live in a very progressive city, that we're lucky in that sense, but it doesn't mean that they're always going to do the right thing. And as citizens of Washington, D.C., we have a right that our our elected officials live up to the expectations that we have of them, right? And that is that protect for everyone. And again, the pain is going to be big, and it's going to be hard. And so that's why it can't be just one institution. It needs to be all of us together. And one of the best ways is to help push policy, right? So we're in the midst of our budget cycle in the District of Columbia. Actually, next week they will take the second vote, and we need to ensure that our elected officials are doing right by our community, and that is to provide the funding necessary to the extent possible to protect people, right? Not just institutions or industries, right? Because I think sometimes people say, oh, we need to protect the restaurant industry, and yes, they do need help, but the people that work in those institutions also need help, and together we're going to get out of this. So I think that my message to really on the Foundry community is, like, you need to connect with Foundry, and as a group, as a collective, use your power to push our elected officials, and together with other institutions do the same thing, so that make sure that no one gets left behind.
And I think that's, God, we've got 5 more days, I think, until the final vote. I think it's the 21st. Is that 5 days, 4 days? Oh my gosh. All right. I don't even know what day it is, Abel. And this is just how it's going. So the 21st is the final vote. There is still time to be emailing your council members and emailing, and especially the council chairman at this point for some of these last minute moves or increases. So we work a lot with Washington Interfaith Network,
exactly,
as do you all, especially around the Legal Defense Fund for the immigrant community. Where else can we be looking right now that has a bit of collective power in terms of engaging with the council? Do you all have like a list of, here are the specific things to ask for, or should we just keep checking in with Wynn and things like that?
Yeah, I think Wynn is an incredible partner in this. We're also part of the DC excluded workers that is trying to push for them to put actually more money to be given out to not just the undocumented community, but a lot of other communities that have been excluded, whether they were returning citizens, whether they're people that were in the informal workforce. And so that has nothing to do with immigration status. It just has to do with the way our system works. Or we're still pushing for the city to give more money for the Immigrant Justice Service Legal Fund, which allows community organizations to provide good legal counsel on immigration law. Now, this is the other thing that we need to remember. As we're dealing with this crisis, the rest of the world has not stopped working. So the courts are still receiving eviction notices at the local level. But our federal government is still putting out policies that are detrimental to multiple communities. And we still are living under an administration that is not wanting to deal with the crisis at the national level, does not want to deal with racial issues at the national level and show any leadership and is still very antagonistic against the immigrant community, right? We see that with the decisions that they lost in the Supreme Court, but that they're trying to still cancel the program. We see with all the attacks that continue to happen to the immigrant community. So we can, the fact that we live in Washington, D.C. puts us close to Capitol. And so we can use our closeness, our geography, to also push at the federal level. So for us in DC, we're lucky that we can push our local officials, but we can also push our national officials, and we don't have to travel very far to do that.
And I'm going to try and have one of my one of our members who has had experience as a congressional staffer to come on and maybe tell us, with this distance, like what's the best way to try and engage congressional offices right now or most effective. So I'll try and get them on in the next few weeks. You touched briefly on it, and just because I know it's so big, let's quickly, if we can, Supreme Court ruling on DACA leaves it in place, but doesn't protect it fully. Like the administration could appeal, I suppose, or come with a different argument. There were the elimination of some of the specialized work visas, and then this whole thing with student visas over the last couple of weeks. A group that kind of ran on, let me do something about undocumented immigration, is now attacking sort of the legal avenues of immigration. And so, which is whatever, I suppose hypocritical, but I won't touch on that. But like, what's going on right now as people are looking at their status? How are ways that we can prepare to help people who are either needing to adjust or just need the ongoing protection? Are there any big pieces of legislations we could be paying attention to right now?
Well, I think at this moment, we're sort of stuck in a place where you have an administration or a president that's more interested in his reelection campaign, and so all of the policies that are coming out are not at either blocking immigrants or allowing them in. It's more about what he can do to get elected, and because of that, you see this sort of all over the place. So with DACA in the Supreme Court basically said that in the way that he canceled the program previously was inappropriate. It never said that he didn't have the authority to do that. And then he quickly, President Trump said that he was going to submit papers to close the program again. But at this moment, DACA is protected. Now the program should be intact. Unfortunately, the people that are charged to administer it is the Department of Homeland Security, which is under the administration. So they're dragging their feet about allowing new applicants to come in. But I do think that one of the things that we can do locally is to help young people that don't have the fees. They need to renew them, and you can do that at an individual level, right? If you think about it, if you can allow or you have the ability to give someone the fee to pay to renew their status, you're giving them protection for 2 years, right? And what we need to make sure is that those people that qualify and that can renew, they should renew, right? But right now we know that given the economic situation, it's really hard. We are waiting also on another thing that would impact hard, and that's the Ramos decision, which is a circuit decision that will see if temporary protective status, or TPS, is shut down, just like the president laid it out. The court has not ruled yet. We're still waiting for that, but that can also impact, given that the immigrant community in the DC is largely Central American, and we have anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 people with TPS in the area. It could severely impact them. But we're still waiting for that. And I think that a lot of that at an individual level is about helping individuals apply, making sure that they have the funds to apply for this. I think at a policy level, unfortunately, until we see a change in Congress, it's not going to happen. I think what we can do is I would urge people to call their friends and families that live in other states, particularly in battleground states like Florida, Texas, and Michigan, and tell them to go out and vote, because it's going to be extremely difficult, right? I mean, they're making it hard. They're already criticizing a mail-in vote, although like 5 states practice it without any issues. We've had absentee ballots done forever. I mean, I think we voted by mail since the Civil War. So again, but there are forces in place that are going to try to block that. And so we really have to redouble our efforts in terms of ensuring that not just us that voted in DC, unfortunately, we're limited in our authority to vote. We're not a state, but we do have family members outside of it, and we need to encourage them to vote no matter how difficult they make it. And any organizations that are really working to ensure to protect the vote, that we are supporting them, even if they're not here locally. I think we're lucky in this area that we'll probably are not going to see high barriers to voting. But even so, I mean, if people have the ability to just drive people to drop off their mail, their ballots, whatever it is, I think we need to figure out organizations that are doing that work and connect with them, because November is right around the corner.
Yeah, and even with us not necessarily facing some of those barriers in DC, we did see some significant issues in the primary with ballots getting to people on time, specifically in Ward 7 and 8, which are our high African American population wards. And so people can go back and watch the oversight hearing, because that was heated. I don't know, that might not be the right word. Anyway, it was more entertaining for what a city council meeting should be in DC, but there is some accountability that needs to take place even for the DC Board of Election. I don't want to take up more of your time, because I'm assuming you've got about another 1,000 interviews to do today. So we'll head toward wrapping up. Is there anything else you want to tell us in this moment before I kind of close this?
Yeah, no, I think that there are a lot of resources out there where people can connect, right? Not just to CARECEN, and we welcome people that want to help volunteer with us. To the extent that we can do that, we can. But I think that we need to look to other resources. I've shared, and hopefully people have seen, for example, the Access to Justice Commission has done an online tool where people can find legal help for multiple issues. And I think that the best thing right now is to share good information and deploy it as widely as we can, so that people, as they're feeling pain and are going through very difficult times, have access to the support that they need, so they can get through this time, which is very difficult. And I think that applies not just to the immigrant community, but it really applies to everyone in this city.
Well, I thank you very much for your time, and we'll make sure that we post more of the links for the ways that people can help. For a period there, even the citizenship classes had moved online. And so as those continue to happen, we'll make sure that we continue to share those, and we'll continue our support. I'm very grateful for you for saying, this is much more than any one individual can do. We have to push around the policy and around the collective action of the city and the whole community. You touched on a couple of pieces that have been floating out there this whole time, in terms of, essential workers without essential wages and without essential protections. And it's something that, and they are the most likely to be exposed and get sick. And that is something that is bedrock in the Christian faith, especially, for example, if you were to look at the Gospel of Mark and the challenges that Christ presents to the what was essentially the healthcare structure at the time, which was through the temple. And you had your farm laborers, your people working with animals, your people working with blood, most likely to get sick, most likely to be considered impure, and then have to pay to be ritually cleansed, which kept them in a perpetual state of poverty, especially for poor farmers in Galilee, where Jesus was from. This was one of his biggest arguments. You are not treating your most vulnerable, your people most exposed to illness, your people who have to be there so that you can eat. You're not treating them appropriately. And this was a big message of Jesus' ministry on earth, and it goes on. And so we find ourselves squarely in a place where we have to continue to fight for those most at risk, and do so in such a way that the church is not corruptly benefiting from their labor and their blood, but is indeed making sure that we are supporting them in such a way that leads to health and life for our whole community. So I think we're going to have to dig a lot more into that. I'll save that for August. And maybe we'll do just the whole month of August on that, I guess. But Abel, thank you so much. We'll stay in touch. We'll continue to support. Thank you for putting me on the community advisory group for the org, and I hope that we'll see each other soon.
Yes, definitely.
I'll pray us out. Go ahead.
No, thank you for inviting and always count on our support, because I think as a collective we can do more than as individuals.
You know it. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll pray for us real quick and then we're gone. Most holy and loving God, for the gift of partnership, for the gift of partners in ministry and in labor, we offer thanks. Will you continue to position us in such a way that we are caring for one another and for the most vulnerable in our community, those who actually put the essential elements of life onto our plates, onto our tables, into our homes. And will you help us to position our whole community in such a way that we are not neglecting critical aspects of our community, our neighbors, our family, our brothers and sisters. Help us to push all of us to be better and to care for one another better in the ways that you would care for us and the ways that you would have us care for each other. Respectful of the many names by which your children cry out to you, I pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Abel, thank you again. Hi to all the family. We will see you soon.
Thank you.